Half of the soccer stadiums being built for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil are behind schedule. One of them recently collapsed during construction and left 2 workers dead. Local leaders are now hoping to assure the public that venues will be ready in time for the world's biggest sporting event. But for many Brazilians, the stadiums are symbolic of the nation's misguided priorities. Protesters pressured politicians to pass laws aimed at improving transportation, education, and to cut corruption. Our correspondent Stephen Gibbs followed every move.
Mass protests across this vast country. It's the last thing many would have expected to see from Brazil. Over the last decade, this Latin American giant has established an image abroad as the land of the future, the darling of the developing world. So what's behind this? The protests, the majority of which have in fact been largely peaceful, began as a complaint over the less than 10 US cent rise in the cost of bus tickets. But they've evolved into a movement united by its frustration with Brazil's political class. At its height on June the 20th, in cities across Brazil, including here in Rio, a total of 1 million people were demonstrating. It's a movement without a leadership and with a range of complaints. One of its central messages is that the reality of life in Brazil is no carnival. Lift the mask of this country, they say, and you'll see serious problems, which, despite 10 years of economic growth, the government has failed to fix.
Yeah, if you go to our health system, you go in the hospitals, people are laying on the floor because they don't even have a bed. You know, if you go to our education, people don't even know how to spell right, don't even know how to speak right, because they don't have teachers. Teachers get paid 700 reais a month, which is equivalent of $350, while our politicians get paid around $20,000. They're worth 11 million a year, each one of them.
The amount Brazil's politicians are paid, and some steal, certainly has fueled the anger here. In 2010, members of Brazil's Congress awarded themselves a 62% pay rise. They currently earn around $204,000 US a year. That's 27 times Brazil's average salary. By comparison, members of the United States Congress earn $174,000, 5 times the average US salary. In the UK, a Member of Parliament earns $100,000 a year, around 4 times the country's average income. Currently, almost 1/3 of all the members of Brazil's Congress are facing criminal charges. And what's worse, punishment is notoriously rare. For much of last year, Brazilians were gripped by a televised trial of dozens of congressmen, including video evidence of cash handouts. 25 were convicted, but all so far have avoided jail. For years, an entire generation of Brazilians have privately complained about corruption, poor public services and inefficiency. But what happened last month is that in the space of just a few days, that evolved into a social movement, catching almost everyone unawares. These 3 young Brazilians, like everyone else, have been amazed by what's happening here. But they also have mixed feelings about the way this is going.
Well, when this protest started, I thought it was a little bit confused because they didn't have like a point. But after a while and getting into the protest and everything, I saw that we actually have a chance to make it work.
But is it a bad precedent that every time the people are unhappy here, 1 million people can go out on the street? Isn't that actually potentially quite dangerous for the country?
Well, I don't think so, because the people that are going to the protests are not really going to a fight or something. They are just arguing for something that they believe.
Paulinha, a marketing executive, has not been to the protests. She's worried that protesting about everything could be self-defeating.
I want more education too. I don't like bad politicians too. But I just don't think that the way that the protests are going is a way a very efficient.
It's like open a window. It's like
Yeah,
to talk about it. Something that
this window was open since for example, you talk about political reform. We do that every 4 years. We vote every 4 years.
I think that the protest going on in this year, 1 year before the election, something that's really important because the politicians that are there, they're worried about it. They are thinking, they are actually stopping to think that all the Brazilians are blind and they can do whatever they want. I think that a lot of people that next year will actually think about before voting.
And the final problem, the World Cup. The Brazilian government lobbied hard to win the right to host the football championships next year. It's since spent $12 billion building and refurbishing stadia, relishing the opportunity to show the world that Brazil has arrived. Its leaders would never have imagined that the event would become a symbol for protesters of waste, corruption and misplaced priorities. But this is a country where everything is now being questioned.